Now, I could start this video by talking about waves being all out at sea, but there's already a large pool of YouTubers making a splash, and there's no point in me wading in. So instead, I'm going to talk about my hybrid workflow. Let's dive in. On screen here, we have the digital version of this piece of paper here, which is basically my patch bay chart. And as you can see, I have 4 patch bays. They're all half normaled. And the way it works, as you can see here, in the bottom row, I have my tape returns. That's on the mixing console. Above them, so that's the inputs. Tape returns are all inputs, obviously. Above that, in the same patch bay, or the same physical patch unit, I have the outputs from my audio interface, which in this case, the first 8 is the Evo 16, and channels 9 to 24 are the Pulse 16. So above that, so it's on a separate actual patch bay unit, so they're not actually connected together, is the inputs to all of my audio interface. And then above that is the direct outputs, again from the console, again on a separate patch unit. The inputs are the line inputs to the desk, and the outputs that go into those line inputs are from my hardware. So my BG1U is in fact my microphone preamp. The PSA1 is a unit from Tech 21NY, also known as a Sans amp, and I use that to input my guitar, and also as an effects unit. Next, we've got the MPC, which is this thing over here, and that is has 6 outputs, the main, left and right, plus individual outputs 1 to 4. Then DVD, I've actually got an old DVD-R recorder, which I'm using as a CD player because I don't have a CD player, at least not a working one anyway. Which you might sound a bit strange for a DJ, but as you can see, if I switch cameras, I actually use a lot of vinyl. And even for my digital DJing, I use DVS. So I do have CDs, but what I tend to do is transfer them straight onto my computer, and then use the digital files from the computer with my DVS system. So I don't actually have a CD player because I don't actually need a CD player, except when I want to hear CDs, obviously, in which case I just put them into my DVD player, which is connected, as you can see. And as you can see now, hopefully, that's connected here, and I can, so the output, because it's a DVD recorder, it's actually got outputs and inputs. So the outputs go, in this case, to line inputs like 11 and 12 on the mixing desk. The next inputs, lines 13 and 14, are connected to my DJ mixer. So if I want to record a mix or a broadcast or whatever, I can do it through that. The next 2 outputs are from my SD 2000, which is a a Roland digital delay unit. And then along here, as you can see, I've got nothing else going to these channels over here, although I actually have got something plugged into the back of the patch bay, and I need to update what they are. So I'm going to go through, this needs updating, I'm going to go through it and update it, but this is basically how it is at the moment. Then as you can see on the top patch bay, inputs Nero left and right is basically my Audient Nero, which is a monitor controller. And as you can see down here, I've actually got all the connections to and from the monitor controller also in a separate box. So that's the main, as you can see here, the main input to the Audient Nero is connected, is normaled, or half normaled I should say, to the control room outputs. So the control room outputs comes here. They can then be patched to any of the line inputs, or indeed directly to the interface inputs, so that I can record the output from the mixer back into the DAW. Next to that, as you can see, I've got the inputs from these are effects returns, but I use them as inputs, as separate inputs, because it's got, yeah, the PSA has actually got two inputs, one on the front, one on the back, for plugging in a guitar, bass, or whatever. It also has two extra inputs as a effects returns, and it's those two inputs which I have connected here. Then I've got the inputs to the MPC, so that I can record and into the MPC, sample, whatever. Then up here, these 4, 7 to 10, this is how I have the control room inserts connected to the bus comp, which is a Warm Audio product, a clone, although probably not a very accurate clone, but a clone of an SSL G series bus compressor. So the insert outputs are going to the compressor inputs, and the compressor outputs are going to the insert inputs of the control room. Then, as I said, we've mentioned already, the inputs to the DVD, because it is a DVD recorder, I can actually record onto DVD and probably onto CD as well, although I haven't tried it yet, via those two inputs. And then along here, I've already mentioned the SDE. Along here we have these, which are for stereo effects returns to the mixing desk. And obviously I have the outputs to the mixing desk here as well. So yeah, that's basically how it all runs. So if I want to record something, for example, to channels say 9 and 10, which in this case is pulse 16 inputs 1 and 2, then I can literally choose any of my outputs here. So although I've got them normaled to inputs 1 to 16, which is this half of the mixer, if I need, for whatever reason, to send them to any other input, I can literally just use my patch cables. So let's say I want to connect the output from my PSA 1 to inputs 17 and 18. So I take this and I can see from here that outputs for the PSA 1 are the third row down and 3 and 4 across. So 1, 2, 3. and then these would go onto the 4th row down wherever I need them to go. So let's just say, for example, 15 and 16. So now anything coming out of the PSA1 will go into 15 and 16, which in this case is line inputs 15 and 16, so it'll come up on these 2 channels here. But I can bypass going through the desk, go down a couple of rows, and go, instead of going to line inputs 15 and 16, I'm going to pulse 16 inputs 7 and 8 direct. So if I want the flavor of the desk, whether it's EQ or just passing through the analog circuitry, I can use the line inputs. But if I want a cleaner signal and want to leave out the path through the desk, then I can just go direct to the interface inputs instead. So yeah, that's the patch bay. So that's how it works. And then here I have the project that I was working on the other day, which, as you can see, is Valerie by Katie Ferrara. 103 is the beats per minute, and it says new intro because basically what I've done is I've taken the original track and done a little intro to it using a cappella from the original track. And if you can see here, it says 82. That's the BPM. So what I've done is I've basically time stretched a part of the vocal so that it's slower, and then when it gets to the start of the track proper, it changes to the original BPM of 103. If I go up, you can see here there's the tempo track. But here, now if I open this up, you can see that this is the routing for the main mix bus. Now this isn't Reaper's standard stereo output. If I bring up the mixer, the standard stereo output is here. Now I've got it muted at the moment because I was doing a playback through the desk, and well, I'll show you what I mean. These here, again, if I open the routing for this, no, not for that, sorry, for this is the one that I was just talking about. So we've got the main mix bus, which is an basically a track that I've set up to send everything else to. And the reason I've done it this way rather than going through Reaper's main stereo bus is just to have more control over it, basically. You can see it's got no hardware output, but it is being sent to the master channel, which is Reaper's main stereo channel. It's got 2 inputs, one of which is track 2, the music bus, and one of which is track 3, the Vox bus. Now the reason I have music and vocals separated into 2 separate buses is so that I can, if needed, provide an instrumental and or a cappella version of the finished track. So if I go to this one now, this is the music bus routing, and as you can see, it has one receive, which is one send, which is going to the main mix bus, which I've just mentioned, but it has it receives from the kit bus, the perk bus, the bass bus, the guitar bus, and the effects bus in this case. Now obviously if there were strings or keyboards or whatever else, then I would have extra buses and they would be added to this list. But in this instance, there aren't many tracks. As I've mentioned in my last video, this is a stripped down version of the song, and it only has vocals, guitar, bass and drums. So the music bus has everything except the vocals, which in this case is, like I said, drums, which is split up into kit bus and perk bus, bass, guitar, and then the effects bus is where all the reverb, delays, etc. are fed to. So let me close that. If I open the next one, this is the Vox bus. As you can see, it sends to the main mix bus, but it also sends to analog to hardware outputs 3 and 4, which come up as 3 and 4 on the mixing desk, or the mixing console, however you want to describe it. And then the next one receives from the drum some, which I'll show you in a minute, and sends to the music bus and also to analog outputs 5 and 6. So the drums come up on here. So drums come up on 5 and 6, percussion comes up on 7 and 8. Let me just close this. And then bass comes up on 9 and 10, which is why 9 and 10 aren't panned but are centered, because I want my bass to be mono even though it's on a stereo bus. 11 and 12 in this instance is the guitars. 13 and 14 is the effects. Now you might see here that I've also got a reference bus, and if I open that up, so any reference tracks will go to that bus, and as you can see, that bus isn't sent to the master channel, but it is sent to its own hardware outputs, which in this case is 1 and 2. So if I want to listen to a reference, I just push up 1 and 2, and I can obviously then swap between 1 and 2 and the rest as necessary. So that's it. So I've basically got these buses here. Like I said, if the track contains keys, then there'll be an extra bus for the keys, and if it contains, say, strings, it'll have an extra bus for the strings, and if it contains horns, it'll have an extra bus for the horns. So how many buses I have here just depends on the nature of the track that I'm working on and what's needed. So it could be less than this, it could be more than this. Obviously, the way that I have things set up, 1 and 2 is reserved for the master output. So I can have up to 11 stereo groups coming back to the desk, which then go out of the control room output. And that control room output, as I showed you already from the patch bay chart, if I can get it up again, control room output goes back to the Nero, but I can and have and do patch the control room output to, for example, inputs 1 and 2 on the audio interface, or it could go to any of the inputs on the audio interface. It could go to 23 and 24. It doesn't really matter, but the point is that I've got a way of recording the output from the mixer back into the DAW. So that's it. And as you can see, I've got things color coded as well. Yeah. So what I'm going to do now, or maybe not directly in front of you, is record the output from the desk back into the DAW using my buses. So what I would do in this situation, press play. Now if I pull the volume down, you can see that it's no longer coming out. So what is recorded into the DAW depends on what's coming out of the mixer in this instance, because that's how I've set it up. And that way I can get the flavor of the mixer, the EQs, etc., recorded into the DAW without having to go through any particular rigmarole, because it's all been set up already. So yeah, that's how it works. So yeah, hopefully you've learned something from this. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time, or not. But either way, I hope you do something that makes you happy.